Hell yes, again. It's fucking freezing today. But it's psychic weather report. Now, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't talk to space aliens. I don't talk to Ouija boards, and I don't meditate and get voices from the elder sentient beings to tell me what's happening and where we're going. What I do and what I've always done is I observe the psychic weather. Psychic weather is brought about by behaviors in both people on the macro scale and things like the mass media and culture. Oh, sorry, people on a micro scale and the mass media and culture on a macro scale. Now, in terms of people on a micro scale, I don't do it by individuals. I do it by groups. See, most human beings, I see them as barometers of existence, of consciousness. And there are certain types of human beings that are just the lowest form of meat golems, and they have the Renfield factor. They will all turn on together. They will all attack you together. They will all get fired up together, because they're basically like an insect mind inside a human, but they're very, very good for observing the psychic weather. And they also exist within the mainstream media and within culture and politics. Now, this is the psychic weather prediction. See, if the climatologist can predict the weather going 50 years in the future, I think I can predict or give a fair account of what to expect in between 20 and 2024. Now, this is not saying this will happen or that will happen. It's more a case of what to look out for, and if it happens, how to respond to it. Now, the first thing to remember before I say any of this is I'm not a doom monkey. I am not here to tell you there are false flag attacks coming and to give you your jollies in that way. I am not here to tell you there's going to be a great awakening. What will happen is the same shit that happens always in the past. Everything comes around again. It just comes in varying degrees. What really matters is not that the shit happens, but it's how it happens and how you respond to it. So, for instance, if we were in 1913 and I was becoming aware that World War One was coming and I had this technology and ability then, I would be saying to you, don't join up. Don't get caught up in a wave of patriotism, because you know what's going to happen. You're going to die in the muck without and not be able to achieve your life, because I think that the elites are just looking for population control based on the factors, and they don't have enough jobs to feed the masses, and they have to cull the young men because they're the potential revolutionary force. Well, overthrow force in that sense, violent force. They learned their lesson very well after the French Revolution. Now, and that's what I would say to people. Look, if you want to join the army and get machine gunned down in Flanders in the mud and have people 100 years later wearing a poppy, wouldn't it be better if you didn't go to Flanders, that you pretended you were disabled, and that way you would have live a full and happy life rather than just being remembered with a poppy by some asshole 100 years later? And that's what I would tell people. So this is in the same thing, okay? Ultimately, this is a spiritual message, like all the things on this channel, and spiritual is both good and bad. But what really matters is how you relate to it. That's why I bring the Lovecraftian analogy constantly into this. The people in Lovecraft stories don't get killed by the entities usually. It's their own response to the entity that makes them become suicidal or go mad. Let's think in those terms. So first of all, remember that your body will still continue to produce blood, new cells, new thoughts, inhale and exhale breaths, love, hate, eat, be happy, be sad, have sound to enjoy music, have mouths to enjoy conversation, have eyes to enjoy nature. So never forget that, okay? That goes on regardless of what happens in the world. That continues in you. And always never ever lose sight of that, okay? You're here to have fun and to make the most of this planet, which is an amazing planet. And you don't remember things like economics and stuff is the pursuit of men, but it's from the world of fantasy, okay? Now, let's get down to business. And I think this would be a good video to share with all your friends because there's things in it that you need to know. Firstly, the economy. Something is happening right now that has been kept out of the media or found in the op-ed pages or in the economic editorials. The EU is it's in its third bad economic downturn. The EU is on the point of mass recession, a deep, deep recession. Now, the reasons they've kept this out of the media are varied. One is that they don't want social uprising in European countries as people are seeing immigrants still streaming in when the economy is about to collapse. Two, the US and Trump, the economy is booming. They've told people that Trump is a moron, he would start World War III, he would ruin the economies of the world, blah, blah, blah. The USA is thriving. Everything is off the scales. Actually, things that had vanished in the past, like heavy industry and manufacturing, are actually thriving in America for the first time in decades. This is unprecedented. While Europe, its economy is still built on frivolous models, business models, with no real industry or manufacturing underneath it. Also, because of the EU and open tendering, things like public works projects have slowed down. So in the past, say if you were an independent state in the EU and you may have had an economic downturn, governments would often invest in things like big major infrastructure programs, things like building underground railways, new high-speed lines, new water and sanitation systems, high-rise public housing development. But because of the EU's open tendering, all these things have been taken over by corporations. So basically, they don't have the ability or the money to do that. Where in the past, the government could say, okay, we're in the shit here. We need to create 100,000 jobs quick. Let's build a new underground rail system for our capital city. It will create 20,000 jobs off the bat, keep people busy, keep suppliers busy, and so on. And keep some vestige, and we'll pay for it on the long finger down the road. Doesn't work like that at the EU anymore. Everything is designed to open tendering towards major corporations. And inevitably they go with the corporations like Siemens, SBB, Alstom, General Motors, General Electric. Major corporations get these contracts, and that's not just only in infrastructure building. It's also in things like the rollout of public services in terms of the healthcare services, where you have GSX and Ciba-Geigy and all the big pharmaceutical manufacturers, Pfizer and so on, then tendering. It's all a tendering process. So basically, the EU produces and makes nothing, okay? Almost nothing. Now, underneath that is the current present economic model, which is built on wet toilet paper. Take a look at retail. Retail is all about selling things selling stuff to people that they don't need, right? That's so important, right? People to know that. Secondly, things like planned obsolescence of electronics and stuff like that. People can't fix things. That's why I have a boombox and electronics from the 1980s, and I have nothing from 4 years ago, and so on. I had a little small business going there for a while, picking up turntables and repairing them because I know I'm fascinated by electronics. People didn't want turntables. I bought some on the cheap, fixed them up, and sold them, and made some money. I can't do that with the things that are made today. Everything is micro designed, and also in such a way it can never be repaired. There's no open architecture in terms of the physical infrastructure of the object, of the technology. So that's all terrible, right? Now, secondly, also things like people buy new cars every year because they have to keep up with the Joneses, or every 2 years. Cars are so well built today that they can literally, with service and garaging them, you can keep them for dozens and dozens of years, maybe decades. People don't do that. Oh, I have to get the new car, this, that, and the other. Okay, and cars are one of the few things that can be repaired because of the diesel engine, but they all want us to go electrics, and that makes it impossible to repair, or the petrol engine. Now, they want you can repair the petrol and the diesel engine. You can't repair the electric one. That's part of the planned obsolescence, inability to repair things. Now, with that economic model and this deep recession coming on, we're going to get obliterated in Europe. If, and it's a big if, the EU gets out of Britain gets out of the EU and Brexit happens, Britain, the UK will thrive economically. It'll be able to force trade deals with everyone else, and particularly the United States. And you will see a UK-USA economic trade pact that will probably be the powerhouse of the world, the China of the next century. The EU states will have missed the boat because everything, as I said, was done towards open tendering by corporations rather than anything else. I'll give you a simple example. There's a horrific story today of 39 migrants, refugees, whatever you want to call them, who were found dead in a truck in Essex in England. Now, if Brexit was already in place, they would have a border around Britain, and those people wouldn't have paid these scumbag human traffickers to take them to Britain, and they'd still be alive. And yet the Remain side will never acknowledge the fact that the EU's open border policy is the machine that drives human trafficking and exploitation of people from Africa and the third world into Europe. And the Liberals will never admit that, but that's what drives it. EU open borders is the grease that oils the evil that is human trafficking and human smuggling. But they all have to be Liberals and so on like that. Speaking of which, the climate change thing will lead to mass suicides among the woke middle classes. If a parent is demented and so possessed by dogma enough to believe that their own child doesn't have a gender for fear it's offensive, the same woke parent will think nothing of putting a cyanide tablet into their daughter or little son's mouth and saying, "You must die, puppet. This is for Greta. This is to save the planet." And I reckon that already the mass suicides over climate change and climate change anxiety are already taking place. It's just that they're not statistically... there's no statistics on why people commit suicide, but people often commit suicide because of irrational anxieties. And climate change is the biggest irrational anxiety of them all. And, did you ever notice that? They never give you the statistics. They always say suicide is off the scale, but they will never tell you what the statistics are on the suicide, because it will soon become apparent that the majority of people are killing themselves because of government policy and things that are heard on the media. And that's the next thing. Ignore what the news media tells you. If you have some asshole newsreader on the BBC or wherever, anything, being serious, today there was a loss of 10,000 jobs, blah, 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 blah. Ignore the fuckers, okay? Ignore the fuckers, okay? That's the black magic spell. That's the most important one of all you must have to learn in the years going forward. If you want to live and develop your psyche as a person and grow spiritually, you must ignore the mainstream news. There's too much of it. It's all doom-laden, and it's all designed around rolling out public policy from governments and corporations and universities, which are all the same thing at this point. All the same thing. But the most important thing of all is to understand that the value of your life is beyond that of a government statistic or the misery imposed by a BBC or any other media newsreader. The value of your life is greater than what they impose upon you. There will still be, like I said at the beginning, your bodies will still function. There will still be nature. There will still be art. There will still be music. There will still be love. There will still be good-looking women to admire. There will still handsome men to admire. There will still be intellectual minds to be inspired by. There will still be comedians who will make you laugh. There will still be jokes and memes that will put a smile in your face every day. Do not, and this is what I'm saying, most important of all here. When the economic collapse happens, the bastards who caused it will want nothing more than you out on the street marching with your placards going, do something, we want change. What you are really doing when you march down those streets during these protests against a recession and wanting things better, what you are really doing is saying to the same people who put you in that position, please bring us out of it. You're further entrenching your own slavery in your mind. You still think that the sum total of your life, your happiness, your contentment, your ability to find joy, love, expression, creativity, and self-worth is based on a government official who will deliver it to you. That's one thing. If I die tomorrow, please, please carry this one message forward to you, that your life is worth more than what any government can do to you in terms of making you depressed, getting you down, or having you believe that they can get you out. Do not let them take the sun from your eyes, the song from your heart, and bird song from your ears, because those things remain no matter what. They are not, no civil servant, politician, or newsreader can take that from you. You can only give it to them willingly. Willingly. And if you read things about the paper like, oh, there's so many homeless people on the street these days. Oh, there's so many suicides because of job losses and people having their homes being repossessed. Your job is not to become those people, okay? That's not the same thing as saying, I don't give a fuck about them. Yes, you can feel bad for them. Your responsibility is to yourself and your loved ones. That's what your responsibility to yourself and your loved ones is. And if you're managing to survive, and believe me, we got through the last recession in Ireland. Most people did okay. They survived, okay? Even the ones that were the worst case off, still, it didn't. Very few of them ended up on the streets unless they were drug addicts and stuff like that. Yeah, loads committed suicide because of all the doom and everything, all the gloom, okay? If you're still got a roof over your head, food on the table, and you have your health, and your loved ones have their health, you're great. Everything's perfect. Everything's wonderful. What does it matter if some family 10 miles away are having their home repossessed? That's not your fault, okay? That doesn't mean you shouldn't give a shit about them. You can give a shit about them. You can, I don't know if you want to help them or not, but marching and protesting and waving a flag is not going to help them, and it's certainly not going to help you. One thing I've learned from a very close friend in England in recent times is there is an amazing magic in gratitude. Gratitude. When you have a roof over your head, but you can't afford the latest, Apple product, you should be grateful that you have a roof over your head. If you have food on the fucking table, but can't afford to have, go on a foreign holiday to Spain, you be grateful that you have food on the table. We need very little to survive and be happy. And most of our economy today is built on bollocks and bullshit. And you should never let the bollocks and bullshit overwhelm you. There may be struggles involved, paying bills. Yes, we've all gone through that. Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents have gone through that as well. Guess what? We're still all fucking here. So don't get this thing caught up that and think, I want to take on the bankers. All the mental illness kicks in. I'm going to take on the bankers. I'm going to form a new government. I'm going to become a free man. All the men of the land, all the mental illness. Don't fucking waste your time with that. Do things like go to the countryside, go to the beach, okay? Look at a sunset. Look at the ones you love around you and say, I'm very grateful that they're happy and alive. And while the news is churning out all this misery and horror, you just you ignore it. You ignore it. Because we're going to change things. Those of us who have the eyes to see and the ears to listen are not going to be this is why this is on an occult channel. Because what the 6 o'clock news is, the news starts at 1 p.m. Din, din, din. End of the world, everything is horrible, terrorism, blah, 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 job losses, economic downturn. You're in a terrible state, right? At the end of the day, and now a news story about, an apple pie festival in Wiltshire. Oh, that feels much nicer. 6 o'clock, you're feeling better, you're starting to feel normal, you're having a laugh with friends at work, you're having 6 o'clock, dun, dun, dun. The news comes on again with this dramatic music. Some cunt reading a fucking piece of of paper who's making 500,000 a year or more goes, it's the end of the world, everything is doomed, the government are doing their best, worship the government, follow their plans, they really want to help, blah blah blah, doom doom, finishes with a story. And tonight, your favorite sports team is playing this, and here's an interview with someone who's painted his body the colors of the team. Oh, you feel better. Yeah, you're normal again, you have your dinner, you're feeling better. 9 o'clock, dun dun dun, 10 o'clock, dun dun dun, here comes the news, more destruction, and it's a cycle. Switch the fucker off. Switch the fucker off. And if you must use it as a fucking a laboratory to monitor things. You can say to yourself, I'm not affected by the news anymore. Not interesting. 2 years ago, I used to shit in my pants when the news came on at the latest thing to scare me. Couldn't give a fuck now. Hey, what does that mean? You have evolved as a human being. You've built up your own psychic firewall. You're developing your charisma. You're growing as an individual. This is what's going to happen in the next 4-5 years. There will be terrorist attacks. If you're not killed by them, be grateful. If the people you love aren't killed by them, be grateful. But I think things are going to change in that front. I think terrorism is going to... I think you're going to see big changes in things like mainstream Islam. You're going to see a lot of these radical mosques and these like hardcore mullahs around Europe losing their power. I can definitely see that happening. Don't ask me why, but it's just something I feel. And I think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that the US is not bombing the shit out of the Middle East to the level it once did. You see, it helps, it helps. Cause and effect. There will be all kinds of things that will happen. But you've got to understand, again, that, like with Syria at the moment, I couldn't give a fuck what's going on in Syria. Couldn't give a shit. Why? I don't live in Syria. You see how simple it is? And then people say, oh, that's a very cold and detached and a selfish point of view. No, it's not. It's a realistic point of view. I can do nothing about it. But I can do something about my life now, here. I can do tangible things. Rather than having my psychic energy depleted by something that doesn't actually exist in my world. Oh, but it'll call terrorism and it'll bring refugees here. Life is for living. So that's the message from between 20 and 2024 in terms of the psychic weather. There's going to be a major economic downturn in Europe. I can't see them avoiding it. There's nothing to come back from this time. They got out of the last recession by flooding the Europe with immigrants, and that allowed businesses to stay in business by undercutting wages and paying immigrants less than what they were paying, say, Germans or French or British or Irish or Dutch or whatever. They can't do that now. That option is not available to them. There's no way out. They're going to have to grin and bear it. They're not going to be able to do... The only way they could do it, get out of it, would be to invest massive in infrastructure. But that would mean removing decades of EU directives on things like open tendering and other legalities towards infrastructure development. So they can't build their way. Like in America during the Great Recession was a time when they built massive infrastructure all over the United States, particularly in the urban areas. All the great bridges of the United States were all built, from the Golden Gate Bridge to the George Washington Bridge in New York. And many vast infrastructure projects were built during the recession to build out of misery. We don't have those kind of politicians who have that kind of vision anymore. We don't have we don't have those kind of engineers or things. The great engineers of the day are concerned about climate change. They're not concerned about building the infrastructure that will radically alter the world, this kind of thing, and help people. When infrastructure, great engineers of the past, they were as much driven by creating massive employment and benefiting the society. Nowadays, they're driven by irrational fears about the sun affecting the Earth's climate. We got lucky with the 2007 and 2008 recession. We got lucky because they were able to flood the place with immigrants to keep the service industries going. that opportunity is over, coupled with the fact that America is going to blossom in the next few years. It's very likely Trump will win a second term. I can't see him not winning. Even if he doesn't win the second term and the Democrats get back in, he has laid the foundation work for at least a decade of prosperity. Britain, if Brexit happens, and at the moment it's a tentative if, they will form a serious economic power pact with the United States. And my country, Ireland, will be in a very, very bad way. Very bad way, because our globalist government will be basically pandering to the French and Germans, who'll be in a deep recession, and the French and Germans believing that we'll be okay because the EU will take care of us. When if we had our governments had any sense, they would have been not so servile to the EU and would have thrown in a lot more help and what you call it, instead of insulting Trump, saying what, hey, let's be friends, instead of laughing and making fun of people for Brits for Brexit, saying, well, it's their democratic choice and maybe there's good things for Ireland in it too. No, they're determined to hang on to France and Germany and go, oh, please, France and Germany, protect Ireland. Well, France and Germany will be in such a bad way that they won't even know Ireland exists. So it's going to be very bad, particularly in Ireland. But guess what? This country will still be one of the most beautiful countries on earth and still a place of lots of fun. And that's what you concentrate on, no matter what country you live on. And what happens if your country has the recession in Europe affects you or not. The important thing is live your fucking life.